Hey y'all, it's Beth here. I've been a mother, a provider, and a shoulder to cry on for years. But on Christmas, my own daughter-in-law called me useless. You know what hurt the most? The betrayal wasn't just in her words, it was the years of deception that came before it. The secrets, the lies that drained me, my home, my life. But when she saw that newspaper headline, everything changed. What did she do when her lies finally caught up to her? You won't believe how it all unraveled. Trust me, you don't want to miss this. The warmth of the Christmas dinner hung thick in the air, with the smells of collard greens, cornbread and turkey filling the modest dining room. The table, worn from years of family gatherings, was crowded with plates and bowls heaping with the comfort food that had once symbolized love and care. Now, the room was filled with chatter, laughter, and the clinking of silverware, but all Beth could feel was the weight of the emptiness around her. Beth, at 64 years old, had always been the one to hold everything together. As a single mother, she had raised her 2 children, Adam and Claire, mostly on her own after her husband's passing. She had given up so much of herself over the years, her dreams, her happiness, and her peace of mind, just to make sure they had everything they needed. And now, as she sat at the dinner table, she couldn't help but wonder when it all changed. When did she stop being the center of their world? Adam, now an adult, sat at the other end of the table, his attention glued to his phone. His wife, Claire, was bustling around the kitchen, refilling drinks and clearing plates. Beth noticed the way they both seemed to move around her, as though she was no longer part of their lives in the way she used to be. Her pride in her family, especially in Adam, was slipping through her fingers like water. The son she had once felt so close to, who had once needed her, was now distant and preoccupied. She pushed those thoughts aside. It was Christmas, after all, the one time of year when family was supposed to come together. But even as she smiled and joined in the conversation, she felt more invisible than ever. As the meal went on, laughter filling the air, Claire made a comment that stung, though no one else seemed to notice. "Honestly, Mom, you're kind of useless these days, huh?" she said. Her words wrapped in a joke, but the cruelty beneath it was undeniable. Beth's face froze for a moment, her mind racing. The word useless echoed in her head, each syllable a sharp pang of rejection. But she forced a smile, a laugh, trying to brush it off. It was nothing, she told herself, just a careless remark, surely. But deep down the hurt festered. It wasn't the first time she had felt like this, like she didn't matter anymore. She had raised her children with love and sacrifice, and now it seemed like they didn't even notice. The thought lingered, and she pushed it away once more, trying to focus on the laughter and the joy around her. But as the evening wore on, the hurt grew harder to ignore. The laughter became background noise, and her mind was flooded with memories. Memories of when Adam was a child, the way he'd looked at her with such admiration and love, the way he had clung to her when he was scared or needed comfort. Where had that respect gone? Where was the child who once saw her as his everything? She caught a glimpse of Adam, now sitting on his phone, his face unreadable. He didn't even look up when she softly asked him about his day. Her heart sank a little lower. "You don't need to worry about anything, Mom," Adam said dismissively, not even looking up from his phone. "We've got everything covered." The words stung more than she expected. She felt the weight of them like a slow, suffocating pressure. They were no longer looking to her for guidance, for help. It wasn't just the physical things that she had once provided. It was her purpose, her role in their lives. Slowly, they were taking control, and for the first time, she questioned whether she had a place in their lives anymore. Beth's thoughts turned inward. She replayed the years in her mind, the sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the missed opportunities, all for them. But now, it seemed like they were pushing her aside. She wondered if her whole life had been about giving, without receiving anything in return. Her mind flashed back to the days when Adam was small, when she had worked double shifts just to make sure he had everything he needed. She could still hear his voice, his little hands wrapped around her neck, telling her, "You're the best mom ever." The memory of that moment stung, and now it felt like a lie. Adam was an adult now, and with Claire by his side, it seemed like he no longer needed her. Maybe he never did. Maybe he had been going through the motions, saying what he thought she wanted to hear. And now, here she was, sitting alone at the table, the laughter around her more like a distant echo. The night wore on, and Beth sat quietly, watching the events unfold in front of her. It wasn't the Christmas she had imagined. It wasn't the one she had worked so hard to create. In the quiet of her mind, she felt the truth seeping in. She wasn't the center of this family anymore. Later, after the dinner had ended and everyone had started to leave, Beth retreated to her bedroom. The house was still filled with sounds of laughter and chatter, but it felt far away. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring out the window. The weight of everything felt heavier now. Her phone rang. It was Adam. She hesitated, but answered it, hoping to hear his voice, to hear something that would make her feel like she still mattered. "Hey, Mom," Adam said, his voice colder than usual. "I need you to do something for me. It's about the money you've been handling." Beth's heart dropped. The request was nothing out of the ordinary, but the way he spoke to her, the distance in his tone, felt like a knife to her chest. She had handled her own finances for years. Why now? Why was he speaking to her like this? "Mom, it's just a quick favor. You don't have to worry about it. You've got enough on your plate," he added, his words casually dismissive. Beth felt the sting of those words, the subtle way he was taking control of her life, her finances. For the first time in a long time, she realized how much he had distanced himself from her, how much he had grown, and how much she had shrunk in his eyes. When the call ended abruptly, with a cold, "You should be grateful we still answer your calls, Mom," Beth felt the finality of it. The hurt surged, and something inside her snapped. Her thumb hovered over the screen as the call ended. She didn't want to feel this way anymore. She didn't want to feel invisible. So, for the first time, she hit the block button. She didn't answer their next call. She wasn't ready to sever the connection yet, but she had taken the first step. For the first time in years, Beth felt a spark of something she hadn't felt in a long time: control. and it terrified her. The morning after Christmas, Beth woke up to a quiet house. The once warm and welcoming atmosphere of the previous night had evaporated, leaving behind a hollow silence that seemed to seep into every corner. The festive decorations that had adorned the house now felt out of place, as if they were mocking her loneliness. The soft hum of the refrigerator was the only sound filling the space, a stark contrast to the laughter and chatter from the night before. Beth sat at her kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of lukewarm coffee, staring out the window. The pain from the night before lingered, each word, each glance, a sharp reminder of how much she had been pushed aside. She couldn't shake the word useless from her mind. It echoed in her head, bouncing around like a ghost that wouldn't leave. She had tried to ignore it, tried to tell herself it didn't matter, but the more she thought about it, the more it hurt. She ran her fingers through her graying hair, feeling the weight of the years pressing down on her. Her children had always been her pride and joy. She had sacrificed so much for them, worked long hours, gone without so they could have more. But now, sitting alone at the table, she felt like an afterthought, like the love and respect she once had was slowly slipping away, replaced by something colder, more distant. Beth couldn't help but replay the events of the night before. The dinner, the strained smiles, the hollow exchanges. Adam had been so distant, his eyes glued to his phone most of the evening. Claire, too, had been preoccupied, flitting around the kitchen, too busy to notice the hurt in Beth's eyes. When had this all started? When had she become invisible? As she sipped her coffee, her eyes fell on the mantelpiece, where an old family photo Saturday, it was from years ago. Adam, as a young boy, full of life and love, standing next to her with a wide smile. A simpler time, before life had become so complicated, before the distance between them had grown so vast. She stared at the photo for a long time, feeling the sting of nostalgia. The realization hit her hard. She had sacrificed everything for this family, and now she was nothing more than an afterthought, invisible, useless. A sharp knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. She stood slowly, feeling the weight of the world on her shoulders, and made her way to the door. It was Mrs. Thompson, her elderly neighbor from across the street, standing with a basket of homemade bread. "Good morning, Beth," Mrs. Thompson said with a warm smile. "I thought you might like some fresh bread. I know it's been a tough few days." Beth managed a small smile, grateful for the gesture. "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. That's kind of you." Mrs. Thompson stepped inside, her presence a quiet comfort in the otherwise cold house. "How are you doing? You don't look like yourself," she said, her eyes sharp as she studied Beth's face. Beth hesitated, unsure how much she should reveal, but something in Mrs. Thompson's gentle demeanor made her feel safe, and for the first time in a long while, she found herself opening up. "It's just things aren't the way they used to be. Adam and Claire, they don't really need me anymore. I don't know what happened, but I'm feeling left behind." Mrs. Thompson's eyes softened with understanding. "I know exactly how you feel, honey. You give your heart and soul to your family, and one day it feels like they don't even see you. But sometimes you have to let go of what you think your family should be. Let them find their own way. You're not meant to live for their approval. Beth felt the weight of Mrs. Thompson's words, and yet they stung. Let go of what she thought her family should be? Could she really do that? Could she accept that her children had moved on without her? That the bond she had worked so hard to build had been slowly slipping through her fingers for years? It was a painful truth, but one she couldn't ignore anymore. "Maybe you're right," Beth whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "But it's hard, Mrs. Thompson. It's so hard." "I know it is, dear," Mrs. Thompson said softly. "But you're stronger than you think. You've raised your children. Now it's time to take care of yourself. You've earned that." As Mrs. Thompson left, Beth stood in the doorway for a long time, the weight of her neighbor's words sinking in. She felt both comforted and more isolated than ever. She had spent her entire life putting everyone else's needs before her own. But now, as the silence of the house settled in, she realized something had to change. The days after the phone call with Adam felt heavy. She sat for hours in her kitchen, her mind spinning with thoughts of how her relationship with her son and daughter-in-law had deteriorated. What had happened? How had things gone so wrong? It felt like she was no longer part of their lives, and no matter how hard she tried to hold on, they were slipping further away. She tried to remind herself of the love she once had for them, of the times when Adam had looked at her with admiration. But the memory felt distant, like a dream she couldn't quite recall. And the more she thought about it, the more resentful she became. Had she been nothing more than a tool for them all these years? Had they ever really cared for her? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of her phone ringing. She looked at the screen, her heart sinking. It was Adam again. She stared at the phone for a long time before reluctantly answering. "Hey, Mom." Adam's voice was as cold as it had been the day before. "I need you to send over some money. It's for a family emergency, but I'll send you the details later. Just let me know when you have it." Beth's heart clenched. It wasn't the money she was upset about. It was the way he spoke to her. So distant, so detached, as though she was just a means to an end, a transaction. "I'll send it over," she said, her voice flat, trying to keep the hurt out of her tone. "Is that all?" "Yeah, that's it," Adam replied, before ending the call with a quick, "I'll send you the details." She hung up the phone and sat there for a moment, the weight of the call sinking in. Her children no longer saw her as a mother, but as a bank to draw from when they needed something. The realization hurt, but it was the truth. Beth sat at her kitchen table, staring at the phone, struggling with the decision of whether or not to give in. Should she just send the money, let it go, and continue pretending everything was okay? Or should she stand her ground and show them that she wasn't a tool for their use? The days that followed felt suffocating. The isolation she felt was now a constant presence, a weight pressing down on her chest. She couldn't escape the thought that she had given everything to her children, only to be left with nothing in return. But deep inside, something was changing. A spark of defiance was growing in her, one she hadn't felt in years. She had been a mother, a caregiver, a provider, but now She had to take care of herself. She had to find her own voice again. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Beth sat down at her kitchen table with a pen in hand. She looked at the blank piece of paper in front of her, feeling the weight of what she was about to do. This letter, this decision, would change everything. Her hands shook as she began to write, each word more difficult than the last. But she knew it was time to take control, time to stop living for the approval of others. Just as she was about to finish the letter, her phone rang again. She stared at the screen, her heart pounding in her chest. Adam's name flashed on the display. For a moment, she hesitated. Would this phone call change everything? Would she answer it? The evening after Adam's call, the weight of everything that had happened settled heavily on Beth's shoulders. She sat in the living room, surrounded by the soft glow of a few lamps, the house otherwise silent. The warmth from the holiday had vanished, and all that remained was the cold feeling of isolation that had crept into every corner of her life. She was alone, and for the first time in a long while, it wasn't just the physical silence that was suffocating, it was the emotional emptiness. Beth stared at the blank piece of paper in front of her, her pen poised in the air. She had finally made a decision. After days of agonizing over what had happened between her and Adam, she had decided she could no longer sit idly by. The words Adam had used on the phone, the way Claire's passive-aggressive comments cut through her, had finally pushed her to the edge. It wasn't just the things they had said, but how they had slowly diminished her, made her feel invisible. She could no longer be the passive bystander in her own life. Her hand trembled as she began to write. The words flowed out slowly, one after another, but each one felt like a small victory. "I'm done being your backup plan." It was simple but powerful. It was her declaration. She would no longer be the one to step in when things went wrong, no longer the one who was expected to forgive, to fix, to carry the weight of their mistakes. As the ink dried on the page, Beth felt a strange calm settle over her. The decision to send the letter was irreversible. She knew that once it was sent, things would change. Her relationship with Adam, with Claire, everything would be different. But she wasn't afraid. For the first time, she was choosing herself. She wasn't just a mother. She was a person with her own needs, her own boundaries. After a moment's hesitation, she folded the letter carefully, then placed it on the table. There was no going back now. But as she sat there, she couldn't shake the thought of how this would affect her family. Would they understand? Would they even care? Needing to clear her head, Beth decided to go to the corner store. It was a simple errand, just picking up some groceries, but her mind was consumed with thoughts of the letter she had just written. She needed a moment to breathe, to walk away from the tension in her home. The air outside was crisp, the streets quiet. As she walked, she thought about the many times she had walked these streets with her children, how much simpler things had been back then. The world seemed smaller then, easier to navigate. But now, everything felt more complicated. The love she once had for her family was slipping away, replaced by a cold distance she couldn't explain. When she reached the store, she stood for a moment, staring at the aisles. not really seeing the products on the shelves. She was lost in her thoughts when she heard a voice calling her name. "Beth, is that you?" Turning around, she saw Janet, an old friend from her nursing days. Janet was in her early 62nd, a woman who had also raised children on her own and who, like Beth, knew the weight of sacrifice and loneliness. They hadn't seen each other in a while, but their bond had always been strong. Janet smiled warmly. "It's good to see you, Beth. How's everything going?" Beth hesitated, then nodded, forcing a smile. "Oh, you know, same old. Just picking up a few things." Janet's sharp eyes saw through her facade instantly. "You don't look all right. Something's wrong, I can tell." Beth paused. She wasn't sure if she wanted to open up, but something about Janet's presence made it feel easier. Maybe it was the years of friendship, the understanding that came from shared experience. She let out a long breath and finally said, "It's just Adam and Claire. Things haven't been right with them. I feel like they don't need me anymore, like I'm invisible to them." Janet listened quietly, her expression softening with understanding. After a few moments, she spoke, her voice gentle but firm. "We don't always get to choose how our children turn out, Beth, but we do get to choose how we treat ourselves. Don't let them define you. You've spent so much time giving, but now it's time to take care of yourself." Beth's heart felt lighter, but the words also stung. Letting go of what she thought her family should be, it was a hard pill to swallow. But as Janet's words sank in, Beth realized that she couldn't continue to live for the approval of her children. She had done enough. She had given everything, and now it was her turn to take back control. "Thanks, Janet," Beth said, her voice quieter now, the weight of everything still pressing on her chest. "I think you're right. I need to stop letting them treat me like this." Janet smiled and patted her on the shoulder. "You're stronger than you think, Beth. Don't forget that." Beth nodded, feeling a sense of comfort from her friend's words. As she left the store and walked home, she felt a little less alone. Maybe she didn't have to fix everything. Maybe it was time to stop trying to hold on to something that was slipping away. When Beth returned home, she stood at the door for a moment, looking at the letter she had written. The decision to send it was still fresh, and the thought of what might happen next made her heart race. She had made her choice, and now there was no turning back. The phone rang just as she set her grocery bags on the kitchen counter. She glanced at the screen, her stomach tightening when she saw Adam's name. She hesitated for a moment, then picked up the phone. "Mom, what's this letter?" Adam's voice came through, cold and accusatory. "You're being dramatic. This is unnecessary." Beth's heart clenched. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, but she stayed silent. Adam's voice continued, berating her for what she had done. His words felt sharp, like a slap to the face. "You don't understand the sacrifices we've made for you. I'm just trying to help you, and this is how you respond?" Beth stayed quiet, letting his words wash over her. She could feel the old instinct to apologize rising, but she squashed it. She didn't need to defend herself anymore. She wasn't going to beg for his respect. Not anymore. She hung up the phone, her fingers trembling, but she felt a small flicker of relief. It was over. The silence that followed was deafening, but it was a silence that gave her space to breathe. For the first time in a long while, Beth felt like she had made a choice for herself. That night, she stood in the front of the mirror in her bedroom. She looked at the woman staring back at her, the reflection of someone who had been through so much, but who had never stopped fighting. She wasn't useless. She wasn't invisible. She had a lifetime of strength to draw from. She wasn't done yet, and she wasn't going to let them define her. The next morning, she went to check her mail. As she reached for the mailbox, she found an unexpected letter. It was from Claire. Her heart skipped a beat as she opened the envelope, wondering what it could be. The letter was short, but its words sent a chill down her spine. "We need to talk, Beth. This has gone too far." The guilt in the letter was thick, but so was the threat. Beth stood there, feeling her resolve harden. This was far from over. She had made her decision, and now she had to face the consequences. The morning light filtered through the kitchen window, casting long shadows across the table where the letter from Claire still lay, untouched. Beth stared at it for what felt like an eternity. Every time she thought about opening it, her chest tightened. It had been sitting there for days, a reminder of the confrontation that awaited her. She had always been the one to keep things smooth, to avoid confrontation, but something inside her had snapped. She couldn't let this go any longer. Her mind replayed the hurtful words from Adam and Claire, how they treated her like an afterthought, as if she were nothing more than a burden to them. And then the letter, the guilt it dripped with, the condescending tone it carried. She knew it was just a ploy, another attempt to manipulate her, to make her feel small. But she couldn't ignore it anymore. She had to confront them, face the truth, and reclaim her dignity. If I don't do this now, I'll never be free of their control, Beth thought to herself, her hand resting on the letter. It was time to stop letting them define her. She couldn't keep holding on to a family that no longer existed. It was time to speak up for herself. She folded the letter carefully, placing it on the table. There was no turning back now. Beth stood up, walked over to the door, and opened it, her heart pounding in her chest. The sound of the doorbell had startled her earlier, and now there she was, Claire, standing on her doorstep with a cup of coffee in her hand. The woman's smile was polite, but Beth could feel the distance between them from a mile away. "Good morning, Beth," Claire said, her voice sweet, but with that familiar undertone of condescension. "Morning," Beth replied flatly. She stepped aside to let Claire in, and they walked silently to the kitchen table, each step feeling heavier than the last. Claire set the coffee cup down gently, her eyes flicking to the letter still sitting on the table between them. She sat down, but there was no warmth in her manner, no real concern for how Beth was feeling, just an air of forced politeness, like she was playing a part she didn't believe in. "I wanted to talk about the letter you sent," Claire began, her voice still smooth but with an edge. "I think you misunderstood. You know we've been trying to help you, right?" Beth clenched her fists under the table. but she didn't speak at first. She let the words sink in. The thinly veiled attempt to gaslight her into believing she was overreacting. How typical. Beth leaned forward slightly, her gaze never leaving Claire's face. Help me? Is that what you call it? You didn't help me, Claire. You used me, manipulated me. You took everything I had to give and gave me nothing in return. Her voice was steady, but beneath it there was a deep well of anger she was no longer willing to suppress. Claire blinked, taken aback for a moment, but she quickly recovered, offering that same insincere smile. I don't think you're seeing the bigger picture, Beth. We're doing what we think is best for you. No. Beth's voice was louder now, cutting through the air. You're doing what's best for you, and you've been doing it for years. You've used me, drained me, and now you want to tell me I misunderstood? No, Claire. I'm not your punching bag, and I'm not useless. I won't let you treat me like I am. Claire's face faltered for a brief moment, but she quickly masked her surprise with a dismissive laugh. Oh, Beth, don't be so dramatic, she said, her tone condescending. You're just upset. We're trying to help you. This is for your own good. No, Beth repeated, her voice firmer now. This is about control, Claire. You're trying to control me, trying to make me feel small so you can take everything. Well, not anymore. Claire's eyes narrowed, her smile fading as she realized she wasn't going to win this battle. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Beth didn't look away. She had to see this through for herself. She wasn't going to let Claire keep manipulating her. She had let it go on for too long, but no more. Just as Claire opened her mouth to respond, the door opened and Adam stepped inside. He looked at the two women, clearly uncomfortable with the tension in the room. He rubbed his neck and tried to step in between them, putting on that familiar air of peacemaker. Mom, Claire, let's just calm down. This isn't helping, Adam said, his voice strained. You've got to understand, we've been trying to help you. All of this, it's because we care about you. Beth's eyes flashed and her voice cut through his words. Care? You don't care about me. If you did, you wouldn't have treated me like this. I didn't ask for your help, Adam. I wanted to be treated like a human, not a project. I'm your mother, not your responsibility. The words came out sharper than she had intended, but they needed to be said. Adam's face went pale as he absorbed her words. He opened his mouth to argue, but the words died on his lips. The silence in the room stretched. The air was thick with tension, and Beth felt something in her shift. For the first time in years, she had stood up for herself. She hadn't apologized, hadn't backed down, and it felt good. Adam glanced at Claire, then back at his mother, his face a mixture of frustration and confusion. You're being unreasonable, Mom, he muttered, shaking his head. I've done everything for you. Don't you see that? Beth's heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't flinch. I'm not ungrateful, Adam, but I'm tired of being treated like I'm invisible. I'm done. Adam opened his mouth again, but before he could say anything else, there was a knock on the door. All three of them turned in surprise. Beth's heart skipped a beat and she felt a flutter of unease. Who else could it be? She stood up, her legs feeling unsteady as she crossed the room. She opened the door to find a lawyer standing on her doorstep. He was older, wearing a dark suit, holding a small package. Without a word, he handed it to Beth and walked away. Beth stared at the package, her mind racing. It was addressed to her, from her late husband's lawyer. She opened it slowly, her hands trembling as she pulled out the contents. It was a legal document, a will. Her breath caught in her throat as she read. The will revealed a large sum of money her husband had left behind. But the most shocking part was that it was now being contested by Adam and Claire. They had been fighting for control of her late husband's estate, and Beth had never known. This changes everything, she whispered to herself, her hands shaking. The realization hit her hard. Her family had been lying to her, using her as a pawn in their financial game. Beth stared at the legal papers in disbelief. Everything she had known about her family, everything she had trusted, had been a lie. She stood there for a moment, the weight of it all sinking in. This wasn't just an emotional betrayal. It was a financial one too. Beth's hands clenched the papers tightly. She had to act, but first she needed to prepare for the fight ahead. The morning light filtered softly through the kitchen window, casting a faint glow across the warm wooden table. I sat in my favorite armchair, the familiar scent of coffee drifting through the air, yet the warmth of the room felt distant, suffocating almost. The world outside seemed to continue as usual, but inside, I was preparing for something that felt like the calm before a storm. The letter from Claire had been lying on the table for days, taunting me with its unread words. I couldn't ignore it any longer. But it wasn't just the letter that was gnawing at me. It was everything. The years of sacrifice, of giving my all to my children, only to be discarded when I had outlived my usefulness. The words "I'm done" echoed in my mind, louder and clearer with each passing moment. I thought back to all the times I had stayed silent, all the times I let my children walk all over me, and how in the process I lost pieces of myself. They didn't respect me, not truly. And if I didn't stand up for myself now, I knew I would forever be trapped in this cycle of neglect. They will never respect me unless I demand it, I thought. I've been playing their game for too long. It's my turn now. I set my coffee cup down and stood, my knees creaking as I walked across the room to pick up the letter. As I ran my fingers over the paper, I felt the weight of it, the weight of everything it represented. I had a choice now, a choice I hadn't had before. The choice to finally stop being their backup plan, their afterthought. The doorbell rang, pulling me out of my thoughts. My heart skipped. I knew who it was. It was time. I opened the door to find Claire standing there, looking as polished and controlled as always, holding a cup of coffee like it was just another casual visit. She tried to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. The air between us was thick with unspoken tension. I could feel it. She could too. "Hi, Beth," Claire said, her tone flat. "We need to talk." "Come in," I said, stepping aside to let her enter. I could feel my pulse quicken. This was it. I had to stand firm. I couldn't let her manipulate me any longer. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the letter still lying between us, as if it were the elephant in the room. Claire set her coffee down, her posture rigid, and I could almost see the gears turning in her head as she tried to figure out how to navigate this. "I've been thinking about your letter," she said, her voice cool, but with that underlying condescension I was so used to. "I think you misunderstood everything. Adam and I have been trying to help you, and you are overreacting." I clenched my fists under the table. She was trying to gaslight me. Again, trying to make me believe I was crazy for feeling the way I did. I wasn't falling for it. "I didn't misunderstand anything, Claire," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I know exactly what's been going on. You and Adam have been using me, draining me, and now you want to act like you're the ones doing the giving? I don't need your help." I never did. Claire blinked, surprised at my tone, but she quickly recovered, her smile growing tighter. "You don't understand," she said. "We're trying to help you. We want the best for you, Beth. You've got to let us in." "No," I said, leaning forward. "I don't need to let you in. I don't need to let anyone control me anymore. I've spent my whole life putting everyone else first, sacrificing everything for my family, and you want to tell me I'm the one who doesn't understand?" Claire's expression faltered. She tried to recover, but I could see the cracks in her armor. The woman who had always treated me like a piece of furniture was starting to look unsure. "Claire, I raised you and Adam. I did everything I could to make sure you both had everything you needed. But now it's my turn to be heard. I'm done playing nice. I'm done letting you control the narrative." The silence that followed was suffocating. Claire opened her mouth to speak, but before she could, Adam walked into the room. His face was tight, his eyes flicking nervously between me and Claire. He was uncomfortable, caught between his wife and his mother, but he didn't know that I wasn't the same woman I had been before. He looked at us, his voice trembling with uncertainty. "Mom, Claire, can we just—" But I cut him off before he could finish. "No, Adam," I said, my voice sharper than I'd intended. "You don't get to tell me how to feel. I've had enough of this. Enough of being treated like I'm invisible, like I don't matter." Adam's face flushed, but he tried to stand his ground. "You don't understand," he said, his voice rising. "We're just trying to help you. You're being ungrateful." "Ungrateful?" I laughed bitterly. "You think I'm ungrateful? I didn't ask for your help, Adam. I asked for respect. I asked for my family to treat me like I'm more than just a financial resource, more than just a backup plan." He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He was silent for the first time, and for a brief moment I felt like I had finally broken through the wall he had put up. Before he could say anything else, the doorbell rang again. My heart skipped. I wasn't ready for another visitor, but there it was. Another knock at my door. I stood up, walked across the room, and opened the door to find a lawyer standing there. A different one. He handed me an envelope, his face expressionless. I looked down at the letter, my heart sinking, as I recognized the name of my late husband's lawyer on the envelope. The lawyer said nothing, just turned and left. I tore open the envelope, my hands shaking. Inside was a legal document, my husband's will. But this wasn't just a will. This was the document that revealed the true nature of everything that had been happening behind my back. It was a contested will, one that Adam and Claire were fighting to control. They had been scheming to take over my husband's money, and they had been using me all along to get there. I couldn't breathe. My whole body went numb as I read the words on the paper. They were trying to erase my independence, to claim I was unfit to make my own decisions, all because of my age and health. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. This wasn't just about emotional betrayal anymore. This was about my life, my legacy, and I wasn't going to let them take it from me. I stood there staring at the legal document, my mind racing. This was it, the battle I had been preparing for. They won't get away with this, I whispered to myself, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. This wasn't just a fight for control over money. This was a fight for my life, and I wasn't backing down. The afternoon light was fading as I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the legal documents the lawyer had handed me the day before. The room felt still, as though the world outside had continued on while I was stuck in this moment of disbelief. I could feel the weight of the papers pressing against my chest, the harsh reality of what was happening to me sinking deeper with each passing second. They were trying to take everything from me, my son, my daughter-in-law. My own flesh and blood had come to this, using my age and health as reasons to claim I was no longer fit to manage my own life. It wasn't just about money. It wasn't just about control over my finances. It was a direct attack on my very autonomy, and it stung more than I ever thought possible. I ran my fingers along the edge of the paper, trying to steady my breathing. I had given up so much for them over the years, my time, my energy, my dreams, and now this? They think they can do this to me, to my life. The words were a whisper, but they ran loud in my mind, not without a fight. I'd never imagined it would come to this, that the very people I loved, the ones I sacrificed everything for, would turn on me. But here I was, and I wasn't about to let them win. The phone rang. I stared at it for a long moment, trying to ignore the pang of anxiety that settled deep in my stomach. It wasn't Adam. It wasn't Claire. But it was time to face them. I had to act. Later, I sat across from my lawyer in his small, dimly lit office. The clock ticked away the seconds, each one making the tension between us feel heavier. I could tell he was sympathetic, but there was no softening of the reality he was about to present. "This is serious, Beth," he said, his voice firm. "If Adam and Claire have medical records backing up their claims, this could be a tough case. They're saying you're unfit. They're trying to take over your life." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. The idea of losing control over everything I had worked so hard to build was suffocating. The lawyer leaned forward, his hands resting on the table as if to steady the gravity of the situation. "You have two choices. You can settle, let them take partial control, or you can fight. But fighting, Beth, is going to be a battle. It could take everything you've got, and if you lose," he trailed off. not needing to finish the thought. I couldn't bring myself to say the word out loud. Settle. It felt like surrender. Settle. I repeated, the word feeling foreign on my tongue. They've already taken enough from me. This is my life, and they won't take it from me too. The lawyer nodded, understanding the steel in my voice. He offered me a sympathetic smile, but it didn't matter. I knew what I had to do. This wasn't about money. This was about standing my ground, about keeping what little was mine. That night, I tossed and turned in bed, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. What if I lost? What if everything I had, this home, the memories, the independence I fought so hard for, was ripped away from me? I kept thinking back to all the times I had given up my dreams, how I worked multiple jobs to ensure Adam and Claire had everything they needed, how I poured my love into them. And now they were turning it all against me, using my age as a weapon. What did I have left to fight for? A house? A roof over my head? But if I couldn't even live there freely, what was the point? I could lose everything, my money, my home, my dignity, but I knew one thing: I couldn't go back. What's the point of living in a house if I'm just a prisoner in it? The thought stung with the harsh reality of my own thoughts. I would rather fight and lose than let them steal my life away. It was a bitter realization, but it was also empowering. I had fought battles before. I had made it this far by my own strength. I wouldn't be silenced. Not now. Not ever. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table again, hands wrapped around my coffee cup. The sun was rising, casting its soft light across the room. But for the first time in days, I felt peaceful. I had made my decision. I reached for the phone and dialed my lawyer's number. My hands were steady now, my voice calm as I said, "Prepare for the fight. I'm not settling. I'm taking them to court." There was no turning back now. I wasn't going to be the victim in this story anymore. If they wanted a fight, they were going to get one. As I started organizing my finances, gathering documents, and contacting people I trusted to help me, I felt a sense of confidence that had been missing for so long. This battle wasn't just about money or control. It was about reclaiming my life, my identity, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me. It's time. I'm done being the victim in my own story, I thought, a surge of power filling me. If they want a fight, they've got it. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, I felt ready. I had the courage to face whatever came next. Just as I was preparing for the battle ahead, a knock at the door startled me. I stood up, walking slowly to the door. My heart raced as I opened it, only to find a familiar face, my neighbor, someone I hadn't seen in years. She stood there, looking serious, her face full of concern. "Beth," she said quietly, stepping into the house. "I've been watching this situation closely. I have something you need to see." I blinked in surprise, unsure of what she was talking about, but the look in her eyes told me this was important. She handed me a piece of paper, and as I scanned it, the words hit me hard. The neighbor had witnessed Claire and Adam's actions over the years. She had information that could completely change the direction of the case. They had been manipulating me in ways I had never seen, and now I had proof. Beth's heart raced as she felt a small glimmer of hope. Could this be the turning point? The key to unlocking the truth? "I'll do whatever it takes to make sure they don't win," I whispered to myself, feeling a surge of strength. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The sun had barely risen, but I was already at the kitchen table, my hands shaking slightly as I sifted through the pile of documents spread out before me. The papers were a reminder of what lay ahead: the court date, the battle, the fight for my life. I wasn't sure how much longer I could hold myself together. The weight of the situation pressed heavily on my chest, but I had no choice but to push forward. I had spent years in silence, allowing my family to manipulate me, using my love for them as a weapon against me. But not anymore. The phone rang, cutting through the stillness of the morning. It was my lawyer. I braced myself for the call. Beth. His voice was steady, but there was a sense of urgency. "Tomorrow's the day. We've got a solid case, but you need to be prepared." His words echoed in my mind. Solid case. It was the first time in a long while I felt like someone believed in me. He mentioned that the neighbor who had stepped forward with information about Adam and Claire had been crucial in strengthening our position. It was a small comfort in the midst of the storm. Beth's thought: "They thought they could control me, but I won't let them. Not today." The hours seemed to stretch on. By the time afternoon rolled around, Adam and Claire had arrived at my door. I wasn't surprised. I knew what was coming. They came in with fake smiles, wearing their best concerned family faces. Adam started the conversation with that same calm voice he always used when trying to get me to bend to his will. "Mom, you don't have to do this," he said, his eyes heavy with feigned concern. "We're just trying to help you. We're worried about you. This is only making things harder on yourself." I could feel the familiar sting of his manipulation. But this time, I wasn't buying it. I had lived with his guilt trips long enough. I wasn't about to let him push me into another corner. Then Claire stepped in, her voice soft and syrupy. "Beth, we've always been a family, haven't we? You know we're just doing what's best for you. Let's settle this outside of court. We don't want things to get messy." They thought I couldn't see through their act, but I did. Beth's hands gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. Her resolve hardened like steel, the anger simmering beneath the surface. This wasn't the first time they tried to control me, and it wouldn't be the last. Beth's thought. They think I don't see it, but tomorrow I'll make them see. Later that night, as I was preparing for bed, I called Tanya. It had been weeks since we last spoke. She had always been distant, but this time she was reaching out to offer her support ahead of the hearing. "Mom, are you sure about this?" Tanya's voice cracked with hesitation. "I just don't want you to make things worse for yourself." I felt the weight of her words, the pain of knowing that my own daughter didn't fully understand the fight I was in. She had always been cautious, always afraid of confrontation. "I'm doing what I have to do," I said, my voice calm but firm. "This is for me, Tanya, not for them." I've earned my peace." Her silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I knew she was unsure, questioning everything I was doing. But I wasn't going to back down. This wasn't about them. It was about me. Beth's thought. This is not about them. It's about me. I've earned my peace. The day of the hearing arrived too quickly. I stood in front of the mirror in my small bedroom, adjusting my suit, making sure everything was in place. The courtroom was going to be cold, sterile, but I wasn't afraid. I would walk in there with my head held high. When I entered the courtroom, I could feel the weight of every eye in the room. Adam and Claire sat there, their faces painted with false concern, their eyes narrowing as I walked past them without a word. They were trying to intimidate me, but it wasn't going to work. Not today. Beth's lawyer began the proceedings with confidence. Adam and Claire presented their case first, painting me as incapable of managing my own affairs. The documents, the medical testimony, they had everything lined up, trying to break me down. But my lawyer wasn't backing down. He challenged their claims, asked questions they weren't prepared for. The tension in the room grew thicker with every word. Beth felt the pressure mounting, but she didn't flinch. Her mind was clear, her resolve steady. This was the moment she had fought for. Finally, it was my turn to testify. As I stood up, I could feel the eyes of everyone in the room on me. I took a deep breath and locked eyes with Adam and Claire. For a moment, the courtroom went completely silent. I began to speak, my voice steady but full of everything I had kept inside for so long. I spoke of the years I had spent sacrificing for them, the love I gave, and how they repaid me by trying to strip me of my rights. My voice wavered once, but I pushed through it. "I raised you both. I gave you everything I had," I said, looking directly at Adam. "But now it's my turn to be heard. I'm done playing nice. I'm done letting you control the narrative." Beth's thought. "This is for every time I was told I couldn't. This is for every time I was silenced." The court session broke for lunch, and I was left alone with my thoughts. Just as I was about to collect myself, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. My heart skipped a beat as I answered. The voice on the other end was low, almost a whisper. "Beth, I've got something you need to see, something that could change everything." The caller didn't identify themselves, but they said they had proof that could completely turn the case in my favor. The details were vague, but it was enough to get my blood running cold. They mentioned something about Adam, something about a financial scheme, something I hadn't seen coming. Beth's heart raced. This was it. This could be the game changer, Beth's thought. This is it. One final move. I will not back down. The silence in the courtroom was suffocating as I sat there, the weight of the moment pressing on me. Today was the day, the final day of this trial. The gavel would fall, and the fate of my life would be decided. I had spent my whole life making sacrifices, letting people walk all over me. But not today. Today, I would stand for myself. The judge entered, his robes swaying as he took his seat. The room became even more oppressive as we all waited for him to speak. The attorneys began their preparations, gathering their final thoughts. I watched Adam sitting with Claire beside him. For a brief moment, our eyes met. I saw something in his, a flicker of guilt, or perhaps it was fear. It didn't matter. It was too late for him to regret it. The gavel came down with a sharp thud. Let the final arguments begin. The judge's voice rang out. My heart raced. I had been preparing for this moment for so long, yet it still felt like everything was happening too quickly. Beth's thought. I've been waiting for this moment my whole life. It's time to take my place in this world. I will not shrink. The trial proceeded, and my lawyer, calm and collected, presented our side with confidence. He dismantled their case piece by piece, exposing the lies and manipulation they had tried to hide. Adam's lawyer, however, was relentless. He attempted to paint me as a frail old woman who could no longer manage her affairs, claiming I was a danger to myself. But then, just as it seemed we were gaining ground, the unexpected happened. Adam's lawyer presented new evidence documents that suggested I had been involved in financial mismanagement. My breath caught in my throat as I saw the papers in front of me. They had managed to find something that could undermine everything. The judge allowed it to be presented, despite my lawyer's objections. The room fell into a hush as the tension skyrocketed. I couldn't let this break me. I knew it wasn't true. It was just another attempt to discredit me. Beth's emotional state. A wave of shock rushed over me, but I pushed it aside. This wasn't the first time I had been blindsided. It wouldn't be the last. Beth's thought. They think this will break me? They haven't seen anything yet. Then it was my turn to speak. The moment I had been waiting for. As I stood and made my way to the witness stand, my legs felt shaky, but my mind was clear. I wasn't going to let them dictate my life anymore. As I began my testimony, something inside me shifted. I wasn't just defending myself. I was taking back what was mine. I spoke of the sacrifices I made raising my children, the long nights, the struggles, the love I gave. I told them about the abuse, how Adam and Claire had used me for their own gain. My voice trembled at times, but it never wavered. I wasn't asking for forgiveness. I was asking for my freedom. Beth's emotional state. I felt empowered, yet vulnerable. This was it, the moment that would define who I was from now on. Beth's thought. I'm not asking for their forgiveness. I'm asking for my freedom. Then, just as the trial reached its peak, something unexpected happened. Tanya walked into the courtroom. My heart skipped a beat. Tanya, my daughter, had been absent from all of this, silent for so long. I didn't know what to expect. But when she took the stand, she didn't look at me with judgment. Instead, there was regret in her eyes. She spoke up, confessing what she knew. She admitted that she had seen what Adam and Claire had been doing to me, but had been too afraid to speak out. Her voice shook as she corroborated everything I had said. She confirmed the financial schemes, the manipulation, the control. My heart ached, but it also filled with a sense of relief. My daughter was finally on my side. Beth's emotional state, a mix of betrayal and relief, washed over me. Tanya's words were the final piece of the puzzle I needed. Beth thought. It's too late for apologies, but at least she's on my side now. The jury deliberated for what felt like hours. Each minute dragged on as I sat there trying to steady my nerves. Finally, the moment arrived. The judge returned to his seat, and the room went silent. The verdict was read aloud. Beth's lawyer stood with a look of disbelief, shaking his head. The court recognizes Mrs. Beth's ability to manage her own affairs, the judge said. Adam and Claire's attempts to control her life were in violation of her rights, and they will be held responsible for their actions. The words hit me like a wave. The weight I had carried for so long suddenly lifted. This wasn't just a legal victory. It was my liberation. Beth's emotional state, relief, freedom. The overwhelming realization that I had won this battle. This life was finally mine. Beth thought, I won. I won my life back. After the verdict was read, I walked out into the hallway, the tension still hanging in the air. Adam, his face twisted in anger, confronted me one last time. He tried to guilt-trip me, asking if I was happy destroying the family, but his words fell flat now. I wasn't the weak old woman he thought he could control anymore. Claire stood by silently, her face hardened with anger. But it didn't matter. I had taken control of my own life. I had stood up for myself, and I wasn't going to back down. Beth's emotional state, cold, final. This was the moment I had always needed to feel. The woman I was supposed to be. The woman I had always been. Beth's thought. You tried to bury me, but I'm still standing. And now it's my turn to leave you behind. As I walked out of the courthouse, the sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over everything. I felt lighter than I had in years. The years of manipulation, guilt, and fear finally lifting off my shoulders. My phone rang, breaking the silence. I glanced at the screen. It was an unknown number. I hesitated but answered. The voice on the other end spoke quickly, with urgency. We need to talk about your future. There's someone who wants to invest in your life's work. I felt a rush of excitement. This was the start of something new, something entirely mine. The future I had been fighting for was finally within my reach. Beth's emotional state, hope, curiosity. This phone call might be the beginning of everything I had ever dreamed of. Beth's thought. The future is finally mine. I won't let anyone take it from me. The courtroom was still as stone, the tension hanging thick in the air. This was it, the final showdown. Everything that had led me here, every moment of doubt and struggle had brought me to this point. I could feel the weight of all the emotions, anger, betrayal, anxiety coursing through my veins. But I wasn't going to let them see how much this had hurt me. Not now. Not anymore. I looked across at Adam, whose face was twisted in uncertainty, a small flicker of fear in his eyes as he avoided my gaze. The time for his manipulation was over. The gavel slammed down, signaling the start of the final day. Everyone rose as the judge entered, his robe sweeping across the floor, his expression unreadable. Adam and Claire sat stiffly, their lawyers by their sides. I knew they were confident, but I wasn't scared anymore. I'd already decided that no matter what happened here today, I would no longer be a pawn in their game. It was time to take back my life. Beth's thought, "I've been waiting for this moment my whole life. It's time to take my place in this world. I will not shrink." The final arguments began, and my lawyer took his position. He spoke with fire, carefully dissecting their claims, one by one, until they were nothing but lies dressed in legal jargon. Adam's lawyer was quick to retaliate, throwing everything they had at me, but I stood firm. Then, out of nowhere, Adam's lawyer introduced new evidence documents that alleged I had been financially reckless. The room shifted. A gasp rippled through the audience as the documents were passed around. I felt a momentary jolt of panic, but I pushed it aside. They were grasping at straws. Beth's emotional. The shock hit me hard, but I fought it down. This wouldn't break me. They couldn't break me anymore. Beth's thought, "They think this will break me? They haven't seen anything yet." When it was my turn, I stood up, legs trembling, but my heart steeled. I was done being quiet, done being the woman they tried to turn me into. I walked slowly to the witness stand, knowing the power I held now. I began to speak. At first, my voice was steady, but as I told my story of the sacrifices, the years of love given without return, the manipulation, the abuse of trust, my emotions got the better of me. My voice cracked, but I held my ground. I didn't ask for forgiveness. I demanded respect. Beth's emotional state. I felt empowered. This was my moment of reckoning. Beth's thought, "I'm not asking for their forgiveness. I'm asking for my freedom." Then came the surprise. Tanya, my daughter who had been absent through it all, stepped into the courtroom. Her face was pale, regret written all over it. I didn't know what to expect from her, but as she took the stand, she spoke up, admitting that she had known about Adam and Claire's manipulations all along, but had been too afraid to speak out. Her testimony corroborated everything I had said. She confirmed the financial schemes, the emotional abuse, and how my family had tried to control me for years. I felt a sting of betrayal, but I also felt a rush of relief. Beth's emotional state. Betrayal mingled with relief. Tanya's words were the final confirmation I needed, but they were also a painful reminder of the years I had lost. Beth's thought, "It's too late for apologies, but at least she's on my side now." The jury deliberated. Each minute felt like an eternity. My heart pounded in my chest, my palms sweaty. When the doors finally opened and the jury filed in, the room grew even quieter. The moment of truth was finally upon us. The judge read the verdict. I stood taller than I had ever felt in my life, waiting for the words that would change everything. Beth's lawyer. "Your Honor, the court finds in favor of Mrs. Beth. Adam and Claire are found guilty of manipulation, financial exploitation, and emotional abuse. The weight of it hit me, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. They had lost. I had won. Beth's emotional state, relief, freedom, the realization that the battle was over. Beth's thought, it's over, but it's just the beginning for me. I stood in the hallway outside the courtroom, the air thick with tension as Adam and Claire approached. Adam's face was red with anger, his words dripping with venom. He tried to guilt-trip me, asking if I was proud of destroying our family. But I saw through him now. I wasn't his to control anymore. Claire, silent, stood by his side. Her face, usually full of smugness, was now twisted with rage. But it didn't matter. They were done. I was done. Beth's emotional state, cold, final. I had made it out. Beth's words. I'm done pretending. You wanted to break me, but look at me now. I'm standing tall and I'm not afraid anymore. Beth's thought, it's done. And I'm done with them. I left the courthouse, the setting sun casting a golden glow on the world around me. For the first time in years, I felt light, like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Just then, my phone rang. I hesitated before answering. The voice on the other end was urgent. We need to talk about your future. There's someone who wants to invest in your life's work. The rush of hope filled me, and I knew this was the start of something new. The future was mine. It was finally mine. Beth's emotional state, hope, curiosity, the door to a new beginning. Beth's thought, a new beginning. This is what I've been waiting for. Time to rebuild my life. As I prepared for this new chapter, I reflected on how much I had changed. No longer the woman manipulated by my family, I had learned to trust myself, to stand tall in the face of adversity. Just as I was about to start my first meeting for the new business venture, a knock came at the door. I opened it, and there stood Claire. Her face was unrecognizable, desperate and worn. Claire, broken and vulnerable, admitted she had nowhere else to go and begged for my forgiveness. I stood there, shocked, unsure of what to do. Could she really change? Or had it been too late? Beth's emotional state, disbelief, uncertainty. The past still loomed large, but could I really leave it behind? Beth's thought, can people change, or is it too late for her?